she's like, I don't want her to leave without, she probably doesn't even have insurance. And the guy's like, there's nothing wrong with your car. So for whatever reason, she didn't respond to him. So he didn't seem to make her more anxious or nervous. So then I think when she finally looked at the bumper and there were other people involved, I think that's when she started to feel embarrassed about her behavior. So then she wanted to backpedal. She was like, okay, well, we can just go and we can just forget about it. And I said, oh no, we're not going to forget about it. I said, what we're going to do is we're going to pull out of the garage. We're going to go across the street on the side street and we're going to exchange information. No, it's perfectly fine. I'm sorry. It's perfectly fine. And I said, oh no, it's not. We're going to go do this. And so I pulled out and I pulled over and I let her go in front of me and we went across the street. And I said, so let's get out of the car. Here's my license and insurance. I really don't need it. I'm so sorry. I don't know. Maybe it's the holidays that's got me insurance. And I said, no. We're going to follow through, because what's not going to happen is you're not going to rethink this story or retell the story after it's over when you're home and settled. And then I will have problems later. So let's get photos and let's exchange information. It really is unnecessary. I said, it absolutely is unnecessary, but we're going to do it anyway. So we did all of that. And she said, I'm just so sorry. And I said, you know what you can do for me, though? I said, I don't really need your sorry, because it really was a ridiculous situation. And my daughter did have to witness this whole incident and she was anxious about it. So don't apologize. I said, but what I want you to do with the rest of your weekend is spend some time reflecting on what it was about me as a Black woman driving a Honda Accord that sent you into a full-blown panic and orbit, that you thought your life was in danger.
Well, I'll tell you.
To me that you might have some real deep racism that you haven't ever addressed, that this could be a good learning opportunity for you.
I'll tell you exactly what the problem was. It was Hyundai. Excuse me. It was a Honda. It was a Honda and not a Hyundai. You a Black woman in a Honda. How you get that car? How you get a Honda? Black folks drive Hyundais. What you doing with this
a four-door sedan?
What? You had a sedan? How you get 4 doors on your car?
And when I said that to her,
4 doors on their car.
When I said that to her, she literally turned red, hung her head in shame, and started to walk away. And I said, also, please be aware that I'm aware that your preteen or teenage daughter has witnessed this whole thing too, and you deserve to have a conversation with her about your behavior, so she doesn't go forward.
Are you serious? She had a child in there as well?
She had a child, because she, at one point when she was in front of my car yelling, she was like, get the phone out. Are you taping this?
Oh,
to her own child.
Wow.
Right? So I absolutely believe that people need to be held accountable for their behavior. What I also believe, through my understanding of social science research and even some physiological research, is a lot of these automatic assumptions that white people make are outside of their conscious awareness. It really is. The problem is when there's not time to be taken afterwards to recognize how their behavior is problematic, or then to work towards correcting it. Because oftentimes, depending on the position of power that you're in, or depending on how the person chooses to wield the power, the consequences can be deadly for people. They can be really problematic. There's been some research with nurses where they've done kind of these lab studies, so it hasn't been with real patients. And what they found is that white nurses respond to white people experiencing pain, or what they perceive as experiencing pain, with more reactivity and more concern than they do to Black patients. That nurses perceive, in specific, Black women as having a higher capacity for tolerating pain and being dismissive of their experience of pain than they do for white patients. And that there are some real consequences, like life and death consequences to that. There's been these virtual reality or like video game scenarios where folks have been put in active shooter scenarios, and what they find repeatedly is that folks are way more easier and quicker and easier able to identify Black assailants in those video games with guns than they are white folks, and that they shoot first when they're Black people. Right? That sound familiar? And so they've done this testing where the by and large, more often than not, what they use is this thing called the implicit association test. But there's also been these other more physiological exams that people have used, like functional MRIs, as well as kind of facial electromyography, and looking at cortisol responses, right? So really like looking at how people physiologically respond differently. And what that to me does is reinforce that something is happening for them on a level that is outside of their conscious awareness. Now, should they not be held accountable for their conscious behavior? They absolutely should be held accountable for their conscious behavior. Should they have to engage in mechanisms to help them continue to remain accountable? Absolutely. But I also think it's important that we get a real sense of the scope of how deeply embedded racism is and how it shows up in individuals' lives, for us to really be able to talk comprehensively about what we want to do about this. It's kind of like that old adage of you have to admit there's a problem first before you can go to fix the problem. And that was the only pushback that I was trying to give you earlier in the first part of the podcast.
I mean, well, you took a real long road to get there. You couldn't Google Mapped there any faster
with it, because I go doopy deep with it.
I mean, you went real doopy deep. That's like you like at the Earth's core right now.
I'm at Middle Earth.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. No, you did. Yes, you did. Oh, and the joy of my soul. Listen, I want to read something to you.
Yep.
Because I think this will help you and the listeners to understand where I come from when I say some of the things I say.
Where I'm from.
Y'all know I was born on a mountain. No, let me stop because I'm about to take it where it don't need to be. But I was born back in the day, right? So, moving forward. So, I'm going to do the first 4 lines of one of my favorite songs ever and break them down as to why this song really started me down this road of understanding race in a different way. Burn, Hollywood burn, I smell a riot going on. First they're guilty, now they're gone. Yeah, I'll check out a movie, but it'll take a black one to move me. And let me tell you why. The 2 lines, yeah, I'll check out a movie, but it'll take a black one to move me, are so significant to me. To me, metaphorically, that is my story as a black man in America. As an American, I stand in solidarity with my fellow Americans, regardless of the color of their skin, their gender, their ability, their orientation. I stand with you. If there are common enemies coming at us and I need to pick up arms to protect my fellow Americans, I am willing to do so. And I have always been, and you know this, very invested in my patriotism as an American. However, I never delude myself into thinking that feeling of camaraderie is reciprocated when it comes to some of my fellow white Americans. So I'll go to your movie, right? I'll go and see Transformers 69 whenever it comes out, right? Because you know that franchise is video porn is what that is. You know it is. You know it is. You know, you just came from the polyamorous conference. They probably already got it out there someplace, right? But I don't delude myself into thinking that that's often reciprocated. And I think that's the thing that for me is a luxury. When I talk about white privilege, I speak almost specifically of the privilege to acknowledge certain things or not. For me, there's no choice. I can't just be American, except when I'm outside of America, and that's when I'm just American. And I feel most American when I'm traveling through Europe and Asia.
You know, I'll never forget when I was dating that dude from Cameroon. He kept calling me a Yankee, and it made me angry every time. Like, stop calling me that. I'm black. I'm not a Yankee. I'm not an American. I was like, we can't be together because you don't understand my racial context here in this country.
Oh, you're Yankee. Pretty Yankee.
Exactly.
I love you so much.
Oh, made me so angry. Right. So, yes. So, people should be held accountable. And because this stuff has real life implications for people, life and death, wellness, access to healthcare, job access. There's been some other experiments where black folks don't get callbacks at the same rate that white people do, even when they have the same qualifications. Folks get admitted to in experimental scenarios. Folks get offered admission to college with the same resumes, same application package. At a higher rate when they're white than when they're black. Like, this has real life consequences. None of this is a joke or a game. And the reality is, we know there are far too many young black children that have either been assaulted or killed by the police. And I mean children. Tamir Rice was 10 years old, who have been shot and killed by the police. So these really do have real life consequences for folks. So I'm not at all ever purporting that we just say, well, people have implicit bias and there it is. Let's all move forward. What I'm saying is people have implicit bias. So then let's think about how we can systemically and in an informed way address their systemic bias. Interestingly enough, there's been a couple studies that have looked at different methods for reducing implicit bias. There's only been one of those studies to kind of look at how we can maintain those reductions in implicit bias over the course of time. And what happens is all of them require some sort of education and training. Like, it's not just so telling people just do better isn't enough. That even people with high motivation to not respond with prejudice, even with people who have low conscious racial attitudes, right? So if you ask them explicitly about their racial attitudes, they will respond in a way that indicates they have fairly low negative racial attitudes, but they still will respond with strong implicit negative racial bias. That even in those situations, they need education and training to help kind of counteract that. And so there are 5 different things. So for all of my white listeners out there, here's your homework. Here's your mental health homework for the week. Engage in these 5 different activities. So the first one is stereotype replacement. What do you think that means, Tomas? What does that look like? I'm going to teach him
one good stereotype, and I'm going to replace it with another good stereotype.
No, wrong. Let's try again. I'm going to call them.
Blacks don't steal. Mexicans do. Thank you.
Nope.
El Presidente.
No. Wrong answer. God, I always have this fear of people that are like tuning in the middle of you saying something real crazy, and they either A, have never listened to the podcast before and don't recognize that you talk crazy just 90% of the time.
Let me be very clear. I am not obligated to help people understand my level of insanity. It is for me to have and share at my leisure. Okay? Okay.
My God, some days you're just like such a liability on this thing. I'm like, stop saying so much crazy stuff. No, stereotype replacement is requiring people to think about how they can replace one stereotypic response with a non-stereotypic response. So for any of those incidents that we just talked about, any of the Caucasian police calling incidents, the simple option is to say, instead of calling the police, but I'm uncomfortable with what's happening, I wonder what else I could do. Like, maybe I could just go up and have a conversation with these people about what's happening. Maybe I could say, hey, little girl, you're selling water. Are you raising money for a cause? Are you just trying to build entrepreneurial skills? What's going on? That would be a non-stereotypical response.
Or maybe you could just mind your business.
No, that's not possible.
Because here's what I'm saying to you. I have walked past people. First of all, you know I'm in Brooklyn all day, every day, right? I have never walked past the Dominican guy selling ices and be like, do you have a permit, sir? Do you have a permit to be here on the corner of Flatbush and Parkside by the park? Should you be? I don't check for those. That's the city's job. If the city want to send somebody else out to check permits, that's their job.